graphics card prices sure did take us for a ride in 2017 and early 2018. Now, however, following the release of the 2000 series GeForce cards and the blessed crashes of several cryptocurrencies, you no longer need to sell that second kidney you know you're not really using, Steve, to buy a new, reasonably powerful graphics card. 1080s can be had for 1080 money, 580s can be had for 580 money, and the 1050 Ti is finally available in the numbers it should have been from the very beginning. The Nvidia camp need no longer settle for anything below the GTX line, and the AMD camp can finally actually find the Vega cards in stock at Newegg. But as is so often the case here on Hardware Corner, let's pretend you're really, really cheap. Believe me, I get it. Sometimes even $140 for an RX 560 or GTX 1050 Ti is just too much. What if you're putting together a gaming rig and all you've got in the budget for your graphics card is $40? Well, you're gonna be buying used. Previous generation even. Odds are good that you'll be willing to entertain anything that seems even kinda reasonable in terms of performance. You don't want the highest frame rates or the densest pixels, you just want fun games that aren't a slideshow. Alright, let's dig into the bin and see what we can find. How about the GTX 550 Ti? Or, even better, how about two of them? To be clear, I'm not suggesting if you see a GTX 550 Ti for $40 you should get it. It's worth maybe half that. Right up front, I can confirm that a single one of these will perform worse than a GTX 750 Ti, 750, or even a GT 740, which you should be able to track down for about that same $40. No, the question we're here to answer is if you find two older cards that support SLI for the same price as a slightly newer card, should you give in to the temptation to go for the dual GPU configuration instead? Well, short answer there is no, but keep watching for the why. Today we're going to be testing the GTX 550 Ti in dual GPU SLI configuration and comparing those results to the $40 750 Ti I mentioned earlier. The system we're using is my current recommendation for super budget gaming, which pairs an Intel Core 2 Quad Q6600 with 6 gigs of RAM. We've got a match set of EVGA 550 Ti's with 2 gigs of VRAM each going up against a 2 gig EVGA 750 Ti. If you want more details on the specs of these particular cards, feel free to Google that info yourself, because I can assure you that the exact clock speeds, memory bandwidth, and so forth of these things isn't going to measurably change your opinion of them when we're done here. First up, we have some synthetic benchmarks, courtesy the 3D Mark Skydiver test. This test is a DirectX 11 benchmark designed for mass-market computers and higher-end laptops, and with today's current crop of AAA titles, a good score in Skydiver will usually translate to a playable experience in just about everything. And our twin 550 Ti's actually do manage a decent graphics score, easily pushing up into 5-digit territory with a score of 10,668 and an average frame rate of 48 frames per second. The 750 Ti by comparison pulled a comparatively massive score of 15,918 and an average frame rate of 73.5 FPS, which is a significantly higher score and doesn't bode well for the $40 SLI solution. Moving over into some games, we've got a AAA title of yesteryear in 2013's Bioshock Infinite, a gorgeous FPS game of the time that looks great and plays well even still. Running at the high graphics preset in DirectX 11 at a resolution of 1600 by 900, which is what I consider to be the lowest reasonable resolution you should have to resort to, even on a budget gaming rig. The 550s managed to push an average 54.2 FPS with lows of 9.2 and a high of 124.5. Not amazing, but perfectly playable, and not really surprising considering the 550 Ti was only 2 years old at that point. The 750 Ti, however, grabbed an average frame rate of 65.6 FPS with lows of 15.7 and a high of 214.2. This maybe isn't surprising considering the 750 Ti came out around the same time as Bioshock Infinite, and suffice it to say the game is perfectly playable on the 750 Ti and looks pretty good to boot. You've seen the benchmark for Rise of the Tomb Raider on this channel before, and it really doesn't need any introduction. 2016's incarnation of Lara Croft running on the 550 Ti's on the lowest possible graphics setting with literally everything turned off does not retain the amazing visual appeal of the game, and also doesn't manage to be incredibly playable, with an overall average frame rate in the benchmark of just 18.3 FPS. The 750 Ti, while an aging card, did manage better. While this score is hampered somewhat by the CPU I'm using on my budget bench, an average of 37.2 FPS is in fact perfectly playable. You could even turn up a few of the graphics settings a touch and possibly improve the gameplay experience by simply putting more load on the graphics card, an option that isn't available to the 550 Ti SLI setup. Overwatch, also not overburdened by any particular need for introduction, managed what could be optimistically referred to as a playable experience on the lowest possible graphics settings at 1600 by 900 on the 550 Ti's. Average frame rates were around 22.6 FPS, but that really doesn't speak to how badly the game functioned under these conditions. The 750 Ti, however, wasn't much better in terms of the average frame rate, only managing 25.3 FPS, but with a higher minimum frame rate and fewer, shall we say, graphical anomalies, the game is significantly more playable, which you wouldn't guess from my aim, but well, that's not really the point now, is it? Hellblade has very slow, deliberate combat, and is simply gorgeous to look at. When you toss it up against a couple of 550 Ti's, however, getting a frame rate that's playable even with that incredibly slow, deliberate combat requires dumping the visual quality into the toilet, and even then it's only marginally successful, managing to eke out an average of 19.3 FPS. In what has become a refrain at this point, the 750 Ti managed an average of 27 FPS and a generally smoother gameplay experience, making the timing for blocks, strikes, and evasions significantly simpler. And as with Rise of the Tomb Raider, I suspect that increasing the graphics preset a touch would actually make the frame rate smoother by putting more weight on the GPU, a tactic, again, beyond the reach of the 550 Ti's. So what's going on here? By a direct comparison of the hardware, a pair of SLI 550 Ti's seems like it shouldn't be that dissimilar in performance to their single younger brother, and for crying out loud, they've got double the graphics memory. Who doesn't love some graphics memory? But here's the sad fact of life. Technologies like SLI and Crossfire are kind of terrible for gaming. Sure, you do get a performance boost over a single card, but it's not a double the performance, double the fun type of situation like you might hope. There are serious technical limitations that mean your second card is never going to be fully utilized by games, and stuff like GPU memory doesn't stack like you hope it would. Best case scenario, with software that implements SLI nearly perfectly like a synthetic benchmark, you'll see around an 80% improvement over the single card. But most games are hit and miss with how they handle SLI. In the best case, you'll see something like Bioshock Infinite, which does see a minor performance boost but is relatively stable, or Rise of the Tomb Raider, which gains some performance at the expense of stability the more you push the performance. Worst case, you'll have something like Overwatch, which doesn't seem to care about your second card at all, or Hellblade, which seems to think your second card is actually an excuse to perform worse. In the end, the smart money for gaming performance continues to be spending your entire budget on the single most powerful card you can find. If you've got $40, even a GT 740 is going to provide better and more consistent performance across a wide range of games than a pair of older cards in SLI, despite what the raw benchmark numbers might say. Factor into that the fact that with a single card you can get a smaller motherboard in a smaller case with worse airflow and still be just fine, and the case for multiple GPUs really starts to look pretty sad. Unless you're also into protein folding, I guess. In which case, why do you only have $40 available for your graphics card?